Welcome to the Ignite 180 podcast, where faith meets fire and transformation takes flight. I'm your host, Sharita Santiago, and together we're unlocking your potential and building unstoppable strategies and sparking the change you've been waiting for. No more playing small. It's time to step boldly into your purpose, lead with impact, and transform every space you enter. If you're ready to ignite your passion and create a ripple of lasting change, this is your moment. Igniter, let's ignite the world together. Hello, and welcome to Ignite 180 podcast. I'm your host, Sharita Santiago, and I'm excited to have you join us again this week as we dive into our conversation on shame. Now, this topic I want to take my time with because it's important to me as a professor, as a leader in my community, as a mom, someone who serves emerging young people frequently. I work with professionals regularly. And one of the things that I think that we fail to realize in society is that we need one another. It's often a topic that's not talked about in the workplace. We sometimes go to work and we're bearing the burden of our own individual challenges. And so after talking about purpose and our direction and our destiny, I wanted to kind of talk about some of the things that create stumbling blocks so that we are not further put into a pit of shame for some of the things we experience. And I mean this not only for those who are actively dealing with personal effects in their lives, but also for those of us who are high performing individuals who may show up, plaster the smile on our face, and soldier up and do the things that we are called to do or the things that are necessary while we internally suffer. So it's important to me to talk about shame, and the topic also hits home for me. As a professor, I was a mentor to a young man who he took his own life about a year ago, and another student who was suffering silently and did not take his life, but subsequently succumbed to some health challenges. Both incidences rocked me as an individual just because I saw the light in both persons, and to learn, in hindsight, the struggle. It's important for us to talk about going out here and getting it and, living the best of our lives, but also just having the capacity to understand what some of the barriers are that we're experiencing when we close our doors to our homes and our bedrooms, and when we don't pick up the phone or we don't post, or our lives aren't looking like someone else's life who's constantly on vacation or going out to marvelous dinners. That who you are is enough and more than enough. Everything about this podcast is about helping you get to the other side of things. So I just want to open up with the idea of just sharing what shame is and how it shows up in our lives on a day-to-day basis. So what I'm going to do is start with a definition, and then I'm going to jump into a report that I found by Harvard Graduate School of Education. They did a study on the loneliness in America, and it looked at loneliness being the tip of the iceberg. And I want to speak to loneliness simply because loneliness is what we see, but beneath loneliness, there are things like anxiety, depression, and shame is also a culprit in that space. I want to have a conversation. A couple of years back, I want to say more than 10 years, I ran across the name of a woman named Brene Brown. And I'd never heard of her before, but she began to talk about shame. And it was in listening to some of her studies and her research, it had become the first time that I'd ever heard anyone talk about some of the things that I've been experiencing, where by sheer definition, shame is looking deeply at pain and emotion that arises from a perception that you may have of yourself related to things like social norms. Maybe you grew up in poverty. you may have had parents who were addicted, family members. Maybe your social norms did not look like a nuclear household where both parents were in the home, they were educated, well paid, um, you know, you purchased a home, that sort of thing, like the standard of what we see. Maybe you grew up in a broken environment, maybe on welfare, lived in a housing project, living in poverty. Maybe you grew up in foster care, was adopted. Those sorts of social norms that we see in what we quote unquote consider tradition or normal may also show up and create a situation where we internalize what didn't look like what society said was normal. So I am not now enough. And that's why we're talking about shame, because it's attached to those things. Shame can also be attached to personal values and expectations. So as a result, what we internally end up doing is we do not anchor the action. So we don't say that the act of not having money is because we didn't go to school, didn't get the education. But what we in turn do is we attach the situation or the circumstance to our identity. And it's so this, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I am a social scientist, and I work in org development where we merge both the behavioral components with business. And just thinking about, things that I've seen in teams and individuals, no matter what we do, we cannot hide or suppress what's really happening on the inside. Either we will self destruct or we will begin to become damaging to the teams that we engage with, the people in our circles. We become damaging to our children, our spouses, our colleagues, and even to those people we love, not on purpose, but hurt people hurt people. And when we're cut and damaged, oftentimes we bleed all over those who are around us. So it's important to have these conversations, because when we attach our expectations, social norms, personal values to our identity, I am X. I am not worthy because I grew up poor. So I am poor. Attaching that label to yourself can lead to a sense of inadequacy, feeling unworthy, or feeling even like you're a failure. And it does affect not only how you show up and how you see yourself, but it also affects how other people see you, which can send you into a spiral of everywhere I go, I'm perceived this way. But as we heard in our last episode, we take ourselves everywhere we go. And if these things go unresolved, oftentimes we can find ourselves in this loop. I want to talk about loneliness also, because loneliness is uh, attached to our ability to be and show up authentically. So I'm going to give you really quickly a couple of bullet points that I found. And I hate, to make this somber, but I want you to hang in here with me, because you might even have experienced bouts or moments of shame based on a number of things. Maybe you're someone who's not from America. Your family is not performing. You might be super intelligent, but maybe your family has some underlying situation where you're not able to show up, perform according to societal norms or in alignment with personal values. Whatever the case is, what we want to do in these next couple of episodes is kill the shame giant in your life, so that you know that God's grace first is sufficient for you, but secondly, that you are enough, and that what you have now and what you're developing is important. It's vitally important for the people who are around you, your love, considered, and cared for. So I'm going to jump into some of these stats. And then we're going to move on to our conversation. So first and foremost, loneliness may not be the only cause of the feeling, because we're complex creatures. Our systems are complex. We may be experiencing loneliness and a number of things because of anxiety, depression, lack of having, meaning or purpose in our lives. We talked about that again early on, that purpose anchoring anchoring ourselves to what it is that we want to do is important. So, for example, the study says that 81% of lonely adults reported to have anxiety or depression. 75% of lonely adults reported to have no meaning or purpose. And for me, when I read that, those numbers are depressing. One of the things the report stated was 21% of individuals, they did a study in 2024 and another one 3 years prior. And I believe they did one prior to that where they looked at loneliness. We are more lonely now than we were before COVID. What's interesting to me about the loneliness, and I'm going to get back to shame in a moment, but looking at loneliness is that we are living more in a society where we're so connected to one another. I'm online and I'm watching friends from high schools, children grow up, and I'm watching people who had babies celebrate, a first birthday. I feel like we're so connected, yet disconnected at the same time, which could also invoke or stir up those feelings that might exist of I am not worthy, I am not capable, I am not fit to do whatever it is I'm called to do. I don't know who I am. I don't know my purpose. And I believe as we look out into the world through whatever device we're looking at. So if we're isolating ourselves in our home and we're looking through these devices, we're looking and essentially saying, wow, look at her marriage or look at his marriage, look at their relationship, look at how they're living. I can never be worthy of that. And I'm here to tell you, you can. But I'm going to give you these statistics. One of the others says that a high percentage of lonely respondents reported social and emotional loneliness. So what this simply means is they're not feeling a part of meaningful groups. So maybe not part of a church group. It reads here that 67% felt like they were not part of a meaningful group. 61% felt like they had no close friends or family. Similarly, there were high respondents of numbers of respondents who had existential loneliness. So, and this loneliness can even come in place being surrounded by loads of people. So 65% of lonely respondents reported feeling fundamentally disconnected from others and the world. 63% reported that their place in the world did not feel important or relevant. I think you all are getting my point that this feeling of shame attached to identity can lead to a number of things. And what we want to do is become one of the reasons I started this podcast was to begin to develop a community. You can go online onto our Facebook group. I do a lot of sharing. I'll do more face-to-face audible engagement in the future, but it's important to me, especially as a believer, as a person who serves and touches a diverse range of people. And when I say diverse, I mean diverse. I'm engaged in the community and I'm seeing people who look like every color spectrum in the world, who believe in a lot of things beyond what I believe, who live a lifestyle that maybe I don't live. But the one thing that I know for sure that people need in and around us is they need community and we need love. And it's sometimes the thing that's very much lacking. So when we deal with our own personal crisis, our own circumstances, we then, if we're coming home and there's no love in the home, maybe you're not married, you don't have kids, and you're coming home alone. All that feeling does when you come into loneliness is affirm already what it is you feel, and the enemy will have a field day with your emotions. So I want to share a story really quickly, and then I'm going to get into just some thoughts on how I believe you can make a shift, practically speaking. Dr. Apostle Jonathan Patterson is going to be on the next episode, and he's going to do a lot of sharing on his book, Shame, the Silent Assassin, because it truly is a silent assassin. But I'm going to talk to you all about strategies to kind of support getting outside of that bubble or circle of shame. Uh, So, one of the things that I want to share in this story is my experience um, growing up and dealing with rejection. As I've become a much more mature and self aware adult, caring for my mental health, caring for my growth and development to ensure that I'm a servant leader who's able to go out into the world whole, healthy, and able to support those around me. I had to do some self work. One of the things I experienced was um, having the experience of growing up and being rejected by my father. Uh, my biological father had shared, to my mom, of course, before my inception, that she should have had an abortion. Now, of course, I wasn't aware of this. And because my mom, happens to love my life and respected the relationship between my father and I, despite their separation. Um, she did not cast that over me. She never told me about the things that he said until later. I'll get to that in a moment. One of the things that I heard when I was probably about maybe 10 or so, I heard my father on the phone with my mother, and he was yelling so loud. I heard him say, "You should have had an abortion with her." I've heard him repeat that on a number of occasions, debating with her back and forth. But despite that, what I'm here to tell you all is how it affected my identity growing up, as a teenage, you developing into your adolescence and maturing into a young adult, you already have the pressures of life against you. Most young people do compare. I compared myself to other people, looked at myself. We didn't have a lot of money, so I'm sizing up my clothes and the way I look and everything attached. But in looming in the background was the shame of I am not enough. I'm rejected. Nobody wants me. I don't look like her. I don't look like her. I'm not shaped like her. I don't think like them. And looming in the back of my mind was that feeling and emotion of never amounting to more or enough. I took what was said not as the circumstance and or act, but I internalized the rejection that happened in my life by way of one of my parents as I am now no good. Not that their situation was an argument and he's angry with her, so he's speaking out of turn, out of his emotions, but the shame of the rejection became an attachment for me. Um, and I wore it in my development. But what tended to happen to me was as I grew older, I found myself fighting at all costs not to be in the state of rejection, fighting to feel like I was a good fit, fighting, and after a while, fighting begins to wear you out. So when I maybe I'd say about 40 years old came to a full understanding that I needed to go seek out therapy. And in that therapy, I began to unpack a number of things. And rejection was something that was a major aspect of me in relationships. I had my flight or fight response was when things got tough, I'll just run away. I don't have to deal with this because I'm going to reject you before you have the opportunity to do it to me. And I didn't know it was a response to this internal shame that I associated with um, because I'd made it a part of my identity. Still high performing, still very educated, working a great job, not lacking in any area related to business. However, when it came to my personal life, dealing with the feeling of not being wanted, being overly critical of myself, that was a number one culprit. So I share a bit of that with you. And as we have our conversation, I'll take deeper conversations. I'll take deeper dives into um, where all of these things went and where they took me. But the one thing I'll say before I transition into why I think this is important, especially for leaders to not only discuss, but also just to kind of explore in a space of resolve and supporting those in your community, is dealing with shame and confronting it help helped me before I married my husband. It helped me to see who I was in the process, to see what I was bringing to the table. Where I felt like I was lacking, I recognized that there is nothing missing, lacking, or broken about me. But I needed some things to be healed and solved. And I even want to encourage each and every single one of you who are listening that there is nothing missing, lacking, or broken in you. That there's some things that have to be resolved, some things that have to be fleshed out. But you are not a broken vessel. I used to own that and say, I'm a broken vessel and God is mending me back together. And it sounded so wonderful, but there was nothing broken about this vessel. Nothing at all. There was it's an attempt to inflict me. The word of God says a weapon will be formed, but it won't prosper. And as a result of it not prospering, I had to recognize that I am not broken. It is not me who's broken, lacking, or missing anything, but the resolve needed to happen with the internal work and just healing the thing that I have attached and made an identity for myself. So I am not a victim, yet I'm a victor. And let's jump into why this is important for you. For you, the business owner, why this is important for you, the parent, why this is important for you who leads others, whether you're leading in a community, in your church, or, in your organization. It's important, one, because in your understanding, well, first I'll do this. So as you're listening to this, understanding how to be aware of something happening inside of you. I talk about self-awareness a lot. Self-awareness is it's a work, and it requires a deep look at yourself, what makes you tick, what you like, what you don't like. And in shame, understanding self awareness and growth also helps you understand triggers. Um, if you have unmet expectations, perceived failures, pressures against you, recognizing those things and addressing those triggers will help you grow your self awareness and support those who are around you. So it also will support you in confronting maybe any and overcoming, support you in confronting and overcoming limited beliefs about yourself and reframing self limiting beliefs and behaviors. So, I just want to share that from the self awareness perspective. I also believe that when we begin to build out resolve, we also refine and shape our ability to be authentic and trust the world. It took me, guys, years to talk about without bawling, having a face full of tears, to really express how I felt about the pain that I carried. There were people who surrounded me who saw me happy and jovial and friendly and communing in groups. And I would be sad, experiencing certain things in my life and not feeling like I didn't have the ability to talk about who I was, what I've experienced, and the impact those experiences have had in the way that I've shown up in the world. Now I feel a bit more um, able to be more vulnerable in circles around people. I can acknowledge the feelings of shame and the struggles appropriately. I can say, and I've said to my father, you rejected me. And as a result of that rejection, like I received rejection from him. I was molested. As a result of being molested, I felt rejected. Uh, I felt in the rejection abuse. I experienced things with my, father's side of the family where they never showed up for me. I felt rejected again, and the infliction continued to happen. Having the ability to open myself up and discuss those struggles and own what it was that transpired helped me not to label myself as such, but and make it an identity. But it's given me the ownership of recognizing this has happened to me, but it does not shape my future. It doesn't shape who I am. It doesn't shape how people will love me later on in life. So one, I'm excited to have Dr. Patterson come on and have a conversation about his authored book. But it's important for us to be aware of what our stuff is, what we carry, so that not only we can deal with it, but then we can encourage those around us to become more open, creating cultures of trust, creating cultures of, I know we don't talk about love often when we're working in teams, but creating a community and a culture of love and consideration, in a space where we reduce judgment and we reduce the judgment, giving the other party, what I want to say, empathy. If we have the ability to encourage openness, we have the capacity to empathize. It reduces the fear of judgment from the other person. So, just having the ability to love, be considerate, empathize where someone else has come from, and reduce the fear of judgment that they may have entering into a room. People say, I teach a communications course, and I've had students one student didn't show up out of fear of judgment. I didn't want to stand up in front of those people and present. Um, I had someone else say the same thing. She said, Professor, I almost got sick in front of the class when you asked me to stand up. There are a number of obvious reasons, like many of us are bashful and public speaking is hard. But then there are sometimes deep rooted things inside of us that limit our ability to show up in spaces. So what I try to do in our community of learning is to create a space where judgment is off the table, so that we're not judging. I also believe that we have a resilience and a tolerance built up when we're able to learn from the things that we've made mistakes in. Not that shame, especially when shame is inflicted on you. So when you don't have any control over the situation and you are, I don't want to use the word victim, but you are experiencing shame by way of someone else's hand. Um, Oftentimes you have to take a step back and learn from it. I had to not only learn from the experiences that I had, though I didn't reject myself, but my father has not come back to date and apologized. However, we do talk. I pray for him regularly, and we're going to let God be God and deal with that. But um, I've had to learn how to process what this is again so that there is not ownership, because shame often arises when we think we failed at something. And again, it is almost like a boomerang. You get 10 feet in front of yourself and you turn around and say, I'm no good at this. This isn't working. I don't trust them. They don't trust me. And as leaders, you want to embrace the moments where you have the capacity to learn and grow. So any moment you have an opportunity to learn or grow, it demonstrates a level of resilience. And the resilience muscle is something that you want to strengthen as best as possible. I talked about empathy just a bit, but the one thing that I want to share last is that you want to, as best as you can, if you're leading people, you want to reduce toxic culture. If you have shame, you don't want to create shame for others in an environment. We as a society will sometimes create rules that we aren't willing to follow ourselves and create situations where we develop shame in others. And if unchecked, you can create a situation where it perpetuates blame, avoidance, and toxic environments. This includes organizational cultures with teams, in families. We have to be mindful that we want to reduce toxic cultures. Um, just think, you could be in a toxic culture as a result of shame. I've sat in churches where the pastor's, blurting out a private conversation over the pulpit. I said it. Yes, I did. I sure did say it. Uh, um, and it creates a shame. Now, maybe they may feel justified, but I can think of as a professional with many hours in developing and leading people, I could think of 1,000 ways to approach someone in resolving a challenge before shaming them from a public platform. But we don't tend to look at it that way. But what those things do is it suppresses anyone else who might be experiencing shame privately from having conversations. It shuts everything down. So you create a closed off, avoidance culture. You have tons of individuals. I don't know if any of you all have ever sat in a meeting with someone who's traditionally shut people down in conversation. But if you create shame in an environment, you'll have a meeting where people don't speak up, they don't talk, they don't share, they don't offer anything. You develop yes men. So that's something that we want to take into consideration as well. We want to create connection, not burn bridges. So I talked a little bit about empathy earlier, but I wanted to take this moment to talk about reducing toxic culture as well. And, just lastly, just thinking about promoting courageous experiences for those who are in our circles. As we confront those shame experiences privately, and we engage within our own individual communities, we want to demonstrate a level of courage. Remember, courage is doing it scared. The definition of courage is I'm afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's doing it boldly, making tough decisions, admitting mistakes, but you want to have the capacity to jump out there and do things from a bold perspective. And I last want to leave you with this. In the report, they gave key recommendations, and I want to give you these three without diving in because I'm going to leave some for Apostle Patterson. The first is you should promote a culture of caring and service. If you are dealing with loneliness, if someone in your organization, on your team is dealing with loneliness, promote a culture of care and service. Now, I talked a little bit about that earlier, having love and consideration, empathy, but you want to promote that in an environment. It says in their report, 75% of adult respondents are slightly more lonely adults, that finding ways to help others as part of community service and caring for others reduces loneliness. The next thing that they suggest is building a social infrastructure that enables people to find and sustain meaningful connections. So finding and sustaining meaningful connections, joining community groups, going to your local church, feeding the hungry, feeding the homeless, but finding ways to engage with others and build true, meaningful relationships. I'll tell you all the God's honest truth. I met my husband online, uh, building relationships, having those conversations, is important. So having the ability not to be afraid to reach out to people, going out to a conference, if they're free events in your area, take a chance and step out there, go to an event, shake a hand and say, hi, my name is, and give yourself an opportunity to be loved. And lastly, it underscores the importance of simply reaching out to others. And that's what I just shared. You want to be encouraged as an individual, not to just find yourself stuck in staying where you are, but making yourself available to those around you. So I know this topic may not have been as exciting. We're going to get into some more conversation with Dr. Apostle Jonathan Patterson, but I really wanted us to have just a slow down dialogue in and around shame, what that looks like, and how we might be able to resolve it. So until next time, God bless each and every single one of you. And remember, let your light shine. You are amazing. God bless you. Have an amazing day. Thanks for tuning in to the Ignite 180 podcast. Be sure to visit our website at ignite180.co and join our community of bold change makers. You're here to break barriers, ignite change, and inspire others to do the same. No gatekeeping allowed. Like, subscribe, and share to help your friends tap into their potential too. Remember, you're salt and light of the earth. So this week, let your light shine and reveal God's glory through you. Until next time, stay bold, unleash your power, plan big, and spark change.